If you've been in Memphis during the past decade, you've probably encountered Jamie Harmon's work. His mobile photo booth, Amurica, has been a fixture at Memphis social events. But when the COVID-19 pandemic shut down the city in 2020, the photographer developed a new project. Instead of taking portraits of people out on the town, he took his camera to them. This is a conversation with Jamie Harmon. Hi, I'm Chris McCoy from the Memphis Flyer, and we're here in Crosstown Arts Gallery with Jamie Harmon. Jamie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So, I guess the first question is about Amurica. You have done this photo booth for, well, when did you start?
It was January of 2011. Actually, I purchased the camper, the original camper, in December of 2010. And then by the end of February of 2011, it was in its first round of what it was going to be, which I didn't know what it was going to be. It was really just going to be a mobile portrait thing for just a project. It wasn't meant to be what it is today.
Yeah.
It was definitely a very simple something to do to roll around and take weird pictures of people.
Okay, so why Amurica? I don't know this. I've always wondered this.
Oh yeah, it's a pretty decent story. Actually, on one of the first dates with my now wife, Leah Keys, I don't know, I had seen a Bank of America sign laying behind Tad Pearson's warehouse home downtown. And it was discarded, and we were out on a date, and I probably was like, maybe I was trying to show off, I don't know. I was like, yeah, I like to scavenge things off the road. And anyway, so I went, and I had been planning on grabbing that sign to do something with it. This was before the photo booth was even a thing. It was, before it was a thing. So I had that, I had taken that, it was discarded, put it in some storage thing that I had. And then when the trailer was done, I was with a friend of mine, Sally Russell, and she saw the sign and was like, oh, if you take the N from the bank part and turn it upside down, you have a U and you can have Amurica. And then we talked about, what is the definition of Amurica? Like there's an Urban Dictionary definition. And then it all came together with like the photo booth was a trailer, and it was kind of the Urban Dictionary said that Amurica was the land of the red, white, trash, and blue. So it's like, oh, it's a trailer trash, Amurica on the side of a trailer. And that was it. That was all it was.
And you decorated the interior of the Amurica photo booths, because there have been several at this point, right?
There's been two that were mobile. One was just destroyed by a traffic accident 6 months ago, and that was the original one, unfortunately. But the second one was built a year and a half later, so like 2012 probably.
Yeah.
And so that my son and I, who was 11 at the time, it was just a project for us to do together. We stapled old pictures up and then put the lights on it, and then it became a software issue, which that came into being over the next couple of years. Like the technology was there. I mean, I have actually used trailers for photography since the early 90s. I had a 1-hour photo lab in an old camper in 1991, and I would go to events, shoot them on film, go out to the parking lot, process and print the pictures in an old 60s camper. But back then, you couldn't do what you can do today because it was digital allowed it to go into the next mode.
I think people who've never done it have no idea how much more convenient digital is than film.
Yeah, for sure.
You like the interior of these photo booths were spectacular, and you had all kinds of stuff in them. Still do. I shouldn't speak of it in the past tense.
Oh yeah, it still exists.
Yeah. But you put all kinds of. Are you like a Packrat?
Well, I think I have a pretty decent rule of if I'm not going to use it, I'll get rid of it. But that was one of those things where if I started collecting weirder things in 2011 to put inside the camper. And then, eventually you lose interest in that kind of stuff. So it's like, I don't really seek out that stuff as much, but you also develop a reputation and people just start giving it to you, like if you oh, you like frog, figurines. If somebody thinks you like those, then every time they travel, they're going to bring you one back. So that stuff like that happened, which I really appreciated because it was nice to have things that were belonged to people from their childhood even.
Yeah.
That were put in there. If I was shooting their wedding, they would be like, I brought this for you to keep in the photo booth. Stuff like that. So it just kind of, it began a life of its own.
So, and yeah, it does have a life of its own. These photographs are all over social media. You know, people go into parties and they get their picture taken in Amurica. I've got 3 or 4. You know.
Yeah, it was very distinctive it was definitely built for social media at the time. I mean, in 2011, I don't even think I was on Instagram at that time. It was around, but I just wasn't using it, you know, at the time. And then I adapted, of course, and it was definitely it became one of those Memphis, people have said it's like your Memphis Passport.
Yeah.
I mean, over the past 11 years now, I mean, the last 2 don't really count because it's kind of been shut down, but there's probably 500,000 photos that I've archived of people in there. And people that were like on their first date, and then I was at their wedding, and then they're in there with their kids, and then so forth. And of course there's other, you know, there's divorces as well, but the kids have grown up with pictures in there. So it's kind of been a cool project. I didn't know the first year when it started getting some traction, my instinct was to run from it. I was like, this can't be, I can't do this forever. But then, you know, it was all positive. Everything became, it's only been positive since it started, really.
Why, I mean, so you've been doing event photography for a while, like that kind of was your roots, right?
I started out actually almost right out of high school, photographing people that rode the riverboats downtown, the Memphis Queen Line riverboats. And it had a Pentax film, it was all film, and I would process and then run to the lab, which was on Beale Street Landing, which is no longer there, and then bring the pictures back to sell them. And I did that for a decade in the 90s. So my 20s was doing that. So I really got used to a camera I didn't even have to think about the metering. It was just like I can look and know what to do because I was doing it all day, every day. Same with printing and processing color. You know, I was using machines that were over a decade old. So in the 90s, that's where I just became more of an obsessive photographer and just documented everything because it was easy. I had access to all of the machinery, and all of the film was cheap because I'd order it in bulk. So really, my obsession of like this project is over 800 images. You know, it was like 15 to 20 miniature creative jobs per day. You know, like every shoot was a new. You've got 15 minutes to do it. That's for later in the conversation probably.
Well, let's go there.
But it's connected, you know, it's connected like you just start something when you're young and then you never stop.
The only other question I have about that, or that seems to be important, is like, you just are so good at shooting people. And like, I mean, some photographers do landscapes, some photographers do like, you know, very posed, kind of stuff, but you seem to thrive on spontaneity and specifically taking pictures of people's faces. I mean,
I think that took time. In my 20s, I was too intimidated by approaching people. You know, as you get older, that becomes a little easier. And I think it was just a good natural progression of my interests when I was younger, and then you get bored with taking pictures of like things that are inanimate, you know, and or finding things or using props or whatever they were, and only shooting stuff of your family. I mean, when you know, it's easy to shoot pictures of your family if they're into it because you're with them. It's close. The intimidation factor isn't there. But I do like to work fast because it doesn't allow me to have to sit there and think about what could go wrong, or the awkward silences of like, what's next? So I think it works better for me to be in a situation to where let's just figure it out when you get here, instead of trying to pre-plan everything.
Which brings us to, what do you call it? Is this the Quarantine Project?
You know, in the beginning it was Quarantine Memphis, but I wanted Memphis to be first, so now it's called Memphis Quarantine.
Well, obviously, March of 2021 happens, the city shuts down, America is not happening anymore.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so that's, it all started, everyone was sent home here in Memphis from school and most jobs on March 13th. And, I think I was initially a little panicked that I was going to be stuck at home, because that was the literal, words that were used, stay at home. And then I started thinking about the rules of like, well, what are the rules? Like, don't go to a bar, don't go to church, don't go to have a party, don't just stay away from crowds. You can go to the park, you can walk around, you can talk to people from 20 feet away, outdoors, it's perfectly fine. But still, the social norms kind of still worried me that if I start taking these pictures, am I going to be targeted, and canceled, or whatever you want to call it. So I first started with friends. Ryan Azada and Maria Applegate were the first people I called to say, hey, can I just come take your picture through your windows, and just to give me something to do. And then after that, I kind of put it on, reluctantly, I put it on social media thinking it's either going to backfire or it's going to keep me busy. And we were all told, yeah, we'll shut down for 2 weeks. Yeah. And then we can, so I was thinking it's a 2-week project. So I was trying to get as many in a day as I could for 2 weeks, because I knew it was going to end, or I thought it was going to end. And after that happened, I was getting text messages and messages from like 5 different sources, from emails and Facebook and Instagram. And that got out of hand. I couldn't keep up with that. So Leah, my wife, said, look, let me take over the organizing of it, because at that point there were too many people. And she made a Google sign-up sheet, which then went almost within weeks to 1,200 people. And then she organized them all by zip code and area. So if I was going to Germantown, I needed like 15 people that were in the same area, so I could just go from one house to the other. Kind of like going to the grocery store. You don't want to go to the produce and then immediately to the eggs and then back to the produce, like plan it, right?
Well, that's how I act in the grocery store. But well, ideally, you shouldn't do that. Yeah.
So when I was doing it, I was like, oh yeah, I'm driving to Collierville, and then I'd have someone downtown. And I was like, I can't, that's too much driving, and that's not efficient. So she broke it down and did the schedule for 2 months. And it was like, she would just put it in a Google map, and I'd open my phone and there would be a list of people there, and I would just go one after the other. So I could just focus on showing up, doing the job, and going to the next one. And then sitting and editing for 6 hours at the end of the day. So it was, we didn't have that many rain days either. So it was almost every day for, 2.5 months, a little over 2.5 months.
See, that's my memory of the beginning of the pandemic, is how beautiful the weather was.
It was beautiful almost until the end of May.
Yeah. I was like, it feels like it should be storming outside or something. Like there should be some visible, like, manifestation of all this.
Yeah, that really helped, because my vehicle is not air conditioned. So driving around all day would have been brutal if it would have gotten into the 90s in the beginning of May. By June 8th, it was hot. Yeah. And that was one of the factors. It was like, yeah, I got to stop. It's just too much.
Yeah. So all these pictures were taken between March
13th and June 8th. June 8th was the last one that I shot. And then it still took me another 25 days to edit, because I wasn't able to keep up with the editing of every day. I couldn't shoot and edit those the same day. And by the time I stopped, I had like early May still hadn't even been looked at. Yeah. So I had a month of editing to do. And so I was finished totally with that by the first week of July, probably. And then every single family or person and dwelling that I showed up to, I would send them a link with their images that were edited, so they could have those to do what they wanted with. Yeah. So like every single 830 of those is all a separate link and all a private thing for them to have. Because there was no charge. Didn't even want to really talk about money, because we wanted it, when I talked to Leah about it a lot, to just brainstorm it, and she was like, it needs to be equitable, like it doesn't need to, you don't need to feel like it is something that you have to purchase, like a private setting of a photographer. It needed to be, just sign up. It's just something for all of us to do. And many people did donate money, to keep things going, which was wonderful, and I appreciate all of those people. But I never discussed it, just because there were so many people that were trying to figure out even how to navigate the government assistance system and all of those things.
So you said you did about 800?
It was about 833, I think, was the total number by June 8th.
Wow.
And and it was also 15-minute conversations with 830 people over those first 2 months. So it was a really great perspective of trying to figure out what is going to happen. So I wasn't really paying attention to those conversations until May. And then it all became clear that, oh, this is going to be the best we get. You know, like these are the golden days. And then it's just going to go to hell, you know? And it kind of did.
Yeah. It's weird to look back on that time and think, you know, that it was, you know, things were pretty okay, but they were. And
scary but temporary at that moment.
Scary but temporary.
Everybody thought it was temporary.
Yeah.
You know, like, we're going to fix this. You know?
Did you let people decide where they were going to get their picture taken?
Well, yeah, I'm pretty flexible, and I like to start things off with, like, I would start things off by saying, you know, good to meet you, all this other stuff, and ask how things were going. And then say, look, there's things that I want to do, and I would like to do things that you would like to do. So where would you like a nice family portrait for your vision, whatever you see? And a lot of them had it all planned, and they had costumes on. Most people were just like, do whatever you want to do. And then it would become clear that once I did what I wanted to do and pick the windows and areas that I wanted them to be in, then they came up with their own ideas. You know, it's like once it got started, they always ended it with, well, can we do one here? You know, they were reluctant to be the director in the beginning, but by the end, almost everybody wanted to be the director.
Yeah.
Which was fine.
When you did, me and my wife, we were like in our robes.
Yeah, and that was just, I happened to be next door.
Yeah.
And I was like, I got to knock
us.
on your door and say, hey, I'm here. Can we do it? Because
Yeah.
I want to get as many as I can. So yeah, you were one of the just happenstances.
What did you learn about people with during this time?
I probably learned more about people say I learned more about myself. And I think, I didn't learn a lot about the people because it was 15 minutes. I mean, I learned where they lived and, you know, that they all have a dog. but
you stared at their faces.
Yeah,
too,
yeah.
You know, because you were taking multiple frames.
Everyone was happy. Everyone was happy. And they were probably happy because there was something happening. Like, I was there. Something is happening. But the pictures I chose to share had that stoic look. And even though that's the one that I shared, because I was trying to just convey, like, this is how we really all feel at 2 a.m. in the bathroom alone. You know, like, we're scared. We're not frightened all day long, but we're definitely nervous about this. And like, that was just kind of conveyed the vibe of what I thought the world might be feeling, even not just the country or this city. But there are just as many pictures of all of these people smiling and laughing and having fun. And in the private link they got, all those were there.
Yeah.
I just chose to share the ones that were conveying what I thought, what I wanted to convey. But what I learned about, you know, I think really I just learned more and more and more about inequality and how privilege and things like that. You know, it's like I would go see these people that were happy at home because they were making more money than they'd ever made, getting, you know, some of them $850 a week from, you know, the government assistance, or they already work from home and they were fine and they felt like, hey, I was set up for this.
Yeah.
And then I would go to the grocery store and the checker would be in Kroger without a mask because it took a while for them to catch up, you know, for the masks weren't even available in the beginning. And those people just had to go to work. So like, I think it was the contrast of seeing people in their homes all day and then seeing people that never quit working.
Yeah.
Like, that kind of thing was like, yeah, it's always been that way.
Yeah.
Right? Not to bring it down. But
No. But did you get some essential worker pictures at some point?
Oh yeah, there were definitely. I mean, these aren't labeled. You know, I wish I could put names and places and all kinds of information on every one of these pictures that are hanging in the show, but that would have taken me a year. You know, like to get all the spellings correctly and get the things right. But there are nurses and I mean, most of these people were scheduled when they signed up. They would tell us the day they were available. Yeah. They didn't just. Some of them said any day we're home, but a lot of them were like, we got their occupation, we knew what they did, and we put a lot of people a little maybe ahead of the line if we knew, like, oh, this person's a nurse, this is their only day off, so we need to get to their house today. And there's one of a person in a T-Rex blow-up outfit that's in here somewhere.
Oh yeah, I saw that one. Yeah.
And that was a nurse, you know, who would walk her dog in that to make the kids in the neighborhood laugh. So every one of them have some kind of story. I mean, I got information about every single one of them. But yeah, plenty. There was infectious disease. doctors that do the research at St. Jude. I photographed, those types of people, from people that worked in warehouses and people that worked at FedEx, and they were, so some of them were all still working. Not all of these people were just home.
Yeah.
They were scheduled.
Yeah.
To get their day.
I walk through these pictures and I see faces that I know and I see faces that I don't know. And we were talking earlier before the taping about the diversity of the faces that we see here too.
Yeah, that was one of the main goals too, is to try to reach out to as many people that might not even have social media. By the time we got into May, I was talking to professors at the universities and people that worked at schools, at high schools and other places to send the message out to reach people that might not have a smartphone or might not have social media, because a lot of people do that on purpose and a lot of people do it because they don't have the option.
Yeah.
And so there, that was starting to get momentum, being introduced to people outside of maybe the connection that I had with people on social media. And then it, I could have gone on a year.
Yeah.
But things changed in the world, things changed in the weather, and it was time to quit. Physically, I couldn't do it anymore. It was just I was just getting too worn out mentally and physically. So at June 8th was like, you've got to stop or you're going to have a wreck.
I think that's really interesting though, because it feels like a lot of times that social media is telling you like, this is everybody, this is what everybody thinks, but it's really not. It's an extension of your network, and then which builds in biases, to a certain extent for the information that
Oh, true. Get. I mean, there's plenty of posts on social media, which this stuff like this made me think about the common people say, well, if you're from Memphis, these things, and they'll take pictures of things around Memphis that everybody knows. And it's like, no, not everybody knows those things. It's like you lived in that neighborhood or you worked and you have a car. So you drove down Union every day. So you see the Sputnik thing or you see the other stuff. But man, not everybody sees the same stuff. So just, it can get very tribal.
Yeah, it can. But I commend you for trying to reach out, for recognizing that and trying to reach outside. So tell us how this exhibit came to be then.
Well, Crosstown Arts really supported me. I was working for Crosstown Arts when we closed. I was running the shared art space that they have, which is an amazing space. And it shut down, and there were many members that no longer had access to that. So, we all went home, and we have a 44-inch Epson printer that printed every one of these. Crosstown Arts funded the ink and the paper. I printed them all, but they paid for all of that. And I was also like on their payroll kind of when I was shooting all of this. And I would talk to my bosses here and say, look, this is what I'm doing. And this was the plan from the very beginning in my mind. I was like, you guys are supporting me. I would love, when this is over, when we can, to have all of these pictures in the gallery here and have these people see these people again. I said, it might be 5 years, it might be whatever. I don't know what it would be. And we're still we're not having a reception because when we planned this in January, when we picked the date in January, everyone was sick with Omicron. Mm-hmm. So we thought we can't announce an opening in February because it would just seem a little reckless, especially for a quarantine exhibit.
Yeah.
But we're planning to hopefully have a closing reception in April. Mm-hmm. So that would be that's April 10th or somewhere near there. We'll figure it out. But yeah, so they were really supportive. So that's why it's in these galleries, is mm-hmm. because this is where I was connected for the last 4 years. I no longer work here, but I still do freelance photography work for the Concourse Building and Crosstown Arts and whatever else comes along.
Yeah. So you're printing some of these photos in a book, right?
Yes, the book will have one image of every person or family that was shot. So it will be a 250-page hardbound book, and it will have at least one image of every single family.
So what do you have? What do you have for the future?
Actually, I'm supposed to meet today with Craig Brewer and I and Jody Brewer are working on a studio space to share. So, but it has to be built out. So that could be 6 weeks. That could be, I don't know, 2 months or more. Depends on how long that takes. But yeah, the plan is to open up just kind of a basic photo studio, not in the style of Amurica across the street, the old studio, because that was really more an event space that was shared and used to rent out. This would just be more of a studio space. And just see where it goes from there, because I've never really had a clean, it's always been junked up. So we'll, the plan is to just see what happens with a clean slate in another direction, and see what happens.
And are you going to take Amurica back out?
The photo booth?
Yeah.
It has been out periodically for private events in the past, month, just a couple days ago. So it's still, the website still has it where you can book it for things, because we can show up and wear masks. And I've gotten to the point where, it's gotten where like you do what you do, it's a little safer. I don't have, if the people hire me don't have a problem, I don't have a problem. I can keep myself protected if I want. So it's still there, it's still moving. It's just not open to the public like at Overton, at places.
You had it at Overton Square.
We used to sit out at Overton Square and places like that, but that also got just a little tough on me, like standing out there till midnight. And so we're inside the concourse building when we are open to the public. That's usually because it's sheltered. They have a huge atrium. They've been wonderful to me, and been able to work out where I can bring it inside and use it there. But we haven't really done it a lot, because it's still been like, just when you think you're ready to go, something happens and everybody gets shut down again. So it's still, the timing has just been off for that, but it still exists and it's still around.
Well, Jamie Harmon, thank you so much for taking time with us today and showing us around these photographs, and thank you for documenting Memphis at a really strange and unique time.
Thanks for having me.